As my colleagues present here would quickly attest, there is no one to whom I would rather listen than myself either. A New Yorker picked up the classified section one morning and noted that outside of Atlanta, Georgia, there was for sale a talking dog for $10. And this New Yorker, of course, was incredulous. He didn't think there were talking dogs, and if there was a talking dog, you certainly wouldn't sell him for $10. But somehow on a lark, he called the number, and he talked to a Georgian with a southern accent who persuaded him that indeed he had a talking dog, and during the telephone conversation, purported to put the dog on the line. And the dog talked. So the New Yorker said, well, might I come down and see the dog? And the Georgian said, well, you're most welcome to, and you can come virtually any time you want. So he flew down to Atlanta, rented a car, drove out into the country, found the farmhouse, and knocked on the door, talked to the farmer, and said, well, I'm the fellow who called you about the talking dog, and I'd like to meet the dog. The farmer said, that's just fine. He's right over here, and you can meet him. So the New Yorker sat down and said, hello, dog. And the dog said, hello. And New Yorker said, well, tell me something about yourself. The dog said, well, I'd be glad to. He said, I am from a substantial, long lineage of talking dogs, and I'll tell you about some of the accomplishments of my parents. He said, for example, my father was very instrumental in bringing about the truce in the Korean War. He said, my grandfather was very instrumental both at Potsdam and Tehran. And the New Yorker said, well, how can that be? He said, well, most people didn't realize that as dogs we could talk. And as a consequence, we could get into many places and overhear many conversations. For example, my grandfather was present and overheard whisperings with Stalin and was able to convey those to Truman that later on led to a firm tripartite division of Berlin and Germany. The New Yorker was stunned by all of this. How can this possibly be? The dog went on and on. Finally, the New Yorker said, well, thank you very much. He said, you know that there's an advertisement in the paper enabling people to buy you. And the dog said, yes, I'm very disappointed in that. I like it here, and I don't know why he's so insistent on getting rid of me, but that's all right. So the New Yorker goes out and talks to the farmer. He said, you know, I didn't believe any of this, frankly, but I've talked to the dog, and he indeed can talk. So I'm sort of amazed, why are you selling him for $10? The farmer said, well, I bet he told you a lot of stuff about Tehran and Potsdam, yeah, and about the Korean truce, yeah. He said, see, the problem is, the farmer said, the problem with that dog is all of those are lies. He didn't do any of that. Now, that's sort of our EDD program. If we had, I and my colleagues had ever accomplished all that some think we have, we would be as valuable as that dog. We are proud that you came here. We are honored that you came here. And there's a set of circumstances, however, that truth in advertising demands we tell you. I will say some things about our EDD program, and I couldn't be more honored to be part of this faculty that did it. But along the way, there were many, many compromises, and I will tell you about some of them. And we still have them, and we know that this is far from a polished or honed program. There are many challenges left to us. If anything, maybe we got there chronologically ahead of some of you, but you may eventually have better answers than did we. While I have this opportunity, let me introduce you to three of my colleagues who are present. Sitting somewhat in front of me is Professor Stephen Paul Heineman, who has been very instrumental in all of this. Sitting at the table on my left is Claire Smirker, whom you will hear tomorrow because she has led much of the way about the capstone program. And on my most immediate left is Professor Ellen Goldring, who has been a stalwart component of the design team and a participant in all the instruction. And you'll meet other faculty members who will be here tomorrow. Now, what went on in our heads? Believe it or not, we didn't start with any EDD program reform. That's not where we began. Our concern was that the PhD program was weak. It was insufficiently intense about methods. It didn't have much of a focus about social science, and there were not a sustainable group of research projects with which PhD students could be engaged so that they were learning as apprentices on their way through. They would get through 2 or more years of coursework and then say, oh, now I have to find a dissertation topic. We knew from our colleagues in the sciences that that's not how they did it, that science students were immersed in research virtually from the time they began, and they worked in laboratories, and along the way, of course, they had courses, but they learned research methods at the bench and at the side of their mentors, and they were introduced to research all along the way, and that's the model we wanted. And that is the model for the PhD that we began to create. We were fortunate in striving for a large number of financially very lucrative research grants that drive much of this because they provide so many research fellowships and assistantship positions for PhD students that they literally can work with some of the nation's best education researchers along the way. But it all started with the PhD program. And we knew that it had to have greater intensity, greater research methodological specificity, and it had to have greater research opportunities in it. Once we understood that, then it became more clear by way of comparison that what we were asking of research students was inappropriate and would not do an individual who aspired to be a leader much good. And therefore, we backed in to the necessity or the utility of altering the EDD program. In no way did that represent an abandonment by the core faculty of the EDD program. Almost the opposite. Among the reasons why I am so proud to be part of Peabody is the intense commitment of virtually every faculty member to the profession, not just to research, but also to the enhancement of the profession of education. No one asked to be relieved from teaching EDD students. No one asked to abandon that program. No one thought that the EDD ought to be collapsed into the PhD so that there was only one program. That just wasn't on the agenda. What was on the agenda was to render the PhD program intense and practical for researchers, and what emerged on the EDD side was to render that program intense and practical for professionals. The one little statistic of which I'm proud, and it will strike many of you as trivial, but as evidence of what I've specified about our faculty's commitment, our EDD program has 30 courses in it. A K-12 specialist will take 18 courses. A higher ed specialist will take 18 courses. And there's a set of courses that they will take in common. Ellen Goldring's class on the introduction to the logic of inquiry is something that cuts across both K-12 and higher education. So they are all in that. The capstone experiences over which Claire Smirker and John Braxton have responsibility both the higher ed and the K-12 people are in those. Steve Heinemann's course on international and comparative education is something that everyone takes. So there's a core of courses, but what I wanted to underscore here, of the 30 courses, 20 of them are taught by our regular tenure track faculty. We're proud of that. There's another 10 that are not. And it's because we don't have the specialized knowledge to instruct in them effectively. There is a course on K-12 legal issues. There is a program evaluation course, for which at the moment we don't have a faculty member who specializes in that. So we go outside and acquire the services and the capabilities of adjuncts to do these. But for the most part, it's our faculty. Now, I mentioned that there were compromises along the way. One of the objectives, and an objective which we have not yet crystallized or met sufficiently, is that we always said that the PhD comprehensive exam, if it were done correctly, would be a virtual mystery to an EDD student. They would approach it and they go, oh my Lord. Well, I must say, in the most recent administration of the PhD exam, it was a mystery to me too, I'll tell you that. In the time since I was a graduate student, the research methods have evolved in a manner so far more sophisticated than what Stanford knew to teach me at the time that I could recognize the questions, but I couldn't answer them. But simultaneously, or concomitantly, we also said that we wanted the EDD comprehensive exam to be mystifying and frightening to PhD students. It was something they couldn't do either, that they would approach those questions and not easily know how to answer them. That was our objective. We wanted something that was so clearly tied to enhancing the profession and so clearly tied to what a successful professional needed that he or she would know that, but would not necessarily be steeped in all of the mysteries of quadratic equations. So we have set out to have two different kinds of exams. Sometimes I think all of us wonder, why do we have the exams? We're not sure why we do that. I'll offer you some reasons in a moment. We do them for both EDD and PhD students. We do it at the end of their second year. In the instance of the EDD students, that comprehensive exam, which is intended to have very applied kinds of questions and simulations and situations and cases to which they would react and respond as a professional. In that examination, we just aren't there quite yet. And one of the things we will be doing is convening a set of practitioners, I hope widely from across the nation, successful superintendents and principals and central office personnel and state education department professionals, assembling them and asking them, trying to distill what it is they do, not so much day to day, but what it is they do month to month and year to year. What is it as a set of skills and knowledge that would be important to them to know? And then we will backward map our way into the right kind of examination or a better examination. And then, of course, it follows from there that we will backward map our way into the courses that support that examination. Now, our courses now are good, and they are practically oriented. I make no apologies for them, but we haven't gone through the rigorous backward mapping that would justify the exam that we want or the courses that we have. That leads me to the first challenge I want to lay out before you that we faced and have not yet resolved. Distinguishing between the two degrees, generally, yes. Different purposes, different admission protocols, different sets of course requirements, different instructional modalities. I mean, one's on an executive, the EDD is an executive program on weekends, the PhD is full-time in residence, so forth. So there are many distinguishing characteristics. But the first challenge we have not yet surmounted is altering the pedagogy sufficiently for the EDD program. We know it's not quite yet. Some of our faculty are more gifted at making it problem-based and relying upon simulations and case studies than are others. But we think eventually the EDD program ought to have a characteristic instructional mode to it. And we're striving, but we're not there. Now, another challenge remaining for us, I mentioned, is to get this comprehensive exam correct, or at least closer approximation to something useful. Why have it at all? Frankly, by the time one gets through our admissions sieve, and we don't take many, we're up to 24 that we take from across the nation. But by the time you get through what we expect, the only reason you wouldn't succeed is if there were some kind of life impediment, that you became ill or you got divorced. I don't know. Life happens. And that would be an impediment. Otherwise, these individuals are so highly able and so highly motivated. Frankly, I hope in my lifetime there's not a value-added test, because I'm not sure what value we will have added. They're very able individuals. But so why have an exam if you know that generally they're able to do it? We still ask for it because we said we wanted a display of mastery. We want to see if you have grasped what we think, at least for the moment, is important. Additionally, we ask for integration. That which Ellen teaches, or Steve or Claire teach, their courses make sense, I have no doubt about it, but they don't have the time, and we've never given them the time to integrate their courses and make sure that there are themes that run across all of them, that they're all striving to reinforce. We haven't done that. We'd like to, but the resources haven't been there to do it. So we ask, if we can't integrate it all, we ask in the comprehensive exam, we ask them to integrate it. And we try to pose questions that would make them think about ways to cross over these subject matter. I remember as an undergraduate being told by a professor who thought it was funny, what we didn't cover in class and what we didn't cover in the reading we'll cover on the exam. And to a small degree, that's our EDD comprehensive. And the third component, we said mastery and integration, and the third component was application, that we wanted to determine or appraise their capacity to apply that which they had learned. So first challenge is pedagogy. Can we develop something which we think is in line with the purposes of this program? The second challenge is to work backward and get a comprehensive exam that makes sense, and then to work from there back into what the courses are. The third challenge is faculty. There is absolutely nothing wrong with our faculty, and I suspect most of the world, of at least education schools, would be delighted to have the colleagues with whom I have the privilege of working all the time. But few of us, very few of us, whereas there are awesome scholars among us, very few have actually run something. Operated a school district, a component of a state education department. We have some experience in that. I don't want to belittle it, and I don't want to betray it. But I don't think our credentials for leadership outside of our own sphere, I don't think our credentials are as sterling as we would like. We did not have the luxury of saying, okay, here's a research faculty over here, whatever that is, and over here is some kind of faculty of practice. And these are extraordinary practitioners, and they will have the EDD program. We couldn't have done that. I'm not sure we would have wanted to have done it fully, because we thought that I thought, and others did, there was some utility in the EDD students seeing our great research faculty. I wanted them to know Joe Murphy. I wanted them to know Ellen and Claire and Steve and on and on. I think it was advantageous for them to do that. In addition, if resources were of no consequence, we would have running in parallel a larger number of successful practitioners. I don't for a moment think that that practitioner track is one that, if I were God, I would not give them lifetime jobs. There's a shelf life for those people. The world changes fast, and you may have been a dynamic, the best superintendent I presently know, and I don't pretend to know all of them, but among the most successful and able and thoughtful that I encounter is Jerry Wiest in Montgomery County. And he serves as the chair of our National EDD Advisory Board. And I think Jerry is a terrific superintendent. He thinks about instruction. He thinks about politics. He thinks about the details. I think he has something like 20 high schools in Montgomery County. It's a big number of high schools. And when it's commencement week, what does Jerry Wiest do? He goes downtown to the convention center where all the commencements take place. He takes a hotel room across the street so that he can be on the stage for every single commencement. And I said, Jerry, that's absurd. He said, I meet all their parents, and all their parents vote, and they all vote for taxers. And so I want to meet them all. He's thought it through all the way. Jerry Wiest would be a terrific addition to our faculty. We are unlikely to match his $400,000 salary this year. But with all due respect to him, 4 or 5 years from now, frankly, I don't know that it changes out there. It changes so fast that I don't know that we want a practitioner faculty that's locked into place. Another challenge for us, we'd like greater cooperation with our business school here, which is, it's not Wharton, it's not Harvard, it's our business school. And we want more cooperation with them, but that's proving difficult to get. But we think that they've got some skills that we would really like to integrate into our curriculum. Now, I'm not going to keep on going with all the hardships we face. Interestingly, let me tell you about one challenge we don't face. I think for us it's important. Our dean is a psychologist and has great faith in the graduate record exam. Admissions in our world lives and dies by GRE scores. The doctoral program, the PhD program, in which Steve and Claire and Ellen are a big part, the mean GRE scores in our department's PhD program are the highest on the Vanderbilt campus and higher than the economics department or the astronomy department. It's tough. Of course, the consequence of that is all of them are about 13 years old to get admitted. But but when it came to the EDD program, our dean was insistent that there would also be a high standard. Now, it didn't have to be as high as the PhD program, but it had to be high. It's 1,200 to get in. Many of our faculty were of great concern that the consequence of that would be to recruit an absolute lily-white Asian set of cohorts. It didn't happen. It's quite mixed, and the number of minorities runs in the neighborhood of about 15 to 20% year to year. And I honestly believe as a consequence, if you set standards, people will meet them. They will strive hard to do so, and we've had that experience. Now, let me end by introducing the final challenge, about which you will hear a great deal more tomorrow from Claire Smirker and John Braxton and others. What's this capstone thing anyway? Well, we're not there yet. We're not sure what it is. But what we knew is that to undertake the research that we now expect of PhD students was inappropriate and unrealistic for the EDD students. It was not, they weren't working in a lab alongside of a mentor all the time. They wouldn't have, if for the PhD students, it's, when you add it up, there's a total of somewhere about 15 research methods course credits, or maybe even 18, for which they are responsible. That would occupy a third of the EDD curriculum. It just was not realistic. So what we strove to do, and are still striving to do, was to find a capstone experience which was comparable or simulated what professionals in the real world encounter. And I'll illustrate some of one of them or so. But and tomorrow, Claire and John will have many more. Practitioners told us, they tell us, and we put it up against your experience. They tell us that when they're at work out there, they mostly work in teams. It's not an isolated endeavor. And so we thought, well, we'd better try to capture that if possible, if that's real. And you don't always, on your team, you don't always get to pick who you want. I pick Peyton Manning, but, I can't always select what I want. So sometimes you have to work with people who are in positions. So it would be a team experience. It would be client-centered, client-oriented. It had to have a client who wanted this product, whatever it was. And it had to meet the standards that the client expected. It also had to build upon the courses and skills that we could convey, we could communicate. So that's the fundamental part of it. And the capstone challenges are different for the higher ed students. That is, it's a different set of challenges than the K-12. But and they work in teams of 3, and they are led by faculty through these processes. I don't know about led, but at least coached or mentored through them. And they do have a capstone report, if you want, that for which they're responsible, and then that is given both to their client and it's presented to our faculty and their colleagues, so a judgment's made about it. We've only done this one time. I guess, Claire, you're coming up on the second time. Now, Claire and John are getting this. So, often N of 1, I can claim great success for this. Everybody made it. But it's a slender reed of experience on which to hang your hat. So thank you for indulging us. If any one of my colleagues had spoken, they might have given you a somewhat different view of this. It's a work in progress about which we are proud, but yet we know it's not finished. Welcome to Peabody College, Vanderbilt University. We are honored to have you here. And David, thank you for enabling us to participate.